They say family is everything. But what happens when your family sells your country's secrets for $250,000? I'm Dr. Samantha Reyes, and 3 years ago, I had to choose between protecting my family and protecting my nation. I chose my nation, and I've never looked back. Let me take you back to where it all began. I was sitting in the operations center of the National Nuclear Security Administration in Washington, D.C., surrounded by 12 monitors displaying seismic data streams from underground nuclear test detection facilities across the western United States. My fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision as I coordinated with a team of younger engineers who were monitoring signals from a critical testing zone. A low alarm beeped, and the tension in the room spiked immediately. This was my world, not the loud family gatherings where my contributions were dismissed as boring government work. Not the holiday dinners where my younger sister Ashley would flash her newest designer purchases while making snide remarks about my sensible wardrobe. This sterile room filled with classified technology where my decisions could literally affect national security, this was where I belonged, where I mattered. I pulled my dark hair tighter into its bun and adjusted my glasses, leaning forward to examine a data anomaly on screen 7. The display showed Site 7 Tango's status as active, its critical data streams flowing normally. That 40-acre patch of Nevada desert that everyone thought was worthless? It housed billions of dollars worth of seismic monitoring equipment, radiation detection technology, and underground infrastructure that could detect nuclear tests from halfway around the world. And legally, it was registered under my name as part of a complex federal property holding structure. My phone buzzed with a video call. Family. I glanced at the time and realized it was 8 p.m., which meant they were probably at dinner somewhere expensive. Again. I hesitated, then accepted the call. Ashley's perfectly made-up face filled the screen first, her blonde highlights catching the ambient lighting of what looked like a high-end steakhouse. Behind her, I could see my parents dressed in formal attire, wine glasses already half empty. "Oh look, it's Sam, still staring at those boring charts in your little bunker?" Ashley's voice dripped with condescension. "I just closed a 6-figure endorsement deal today, Sam. How's the whole saving the environment thing going that Mom and Dad keep telling everyone about?" She laughed and turned the camera to show off a massive diamond ring on her right hand. I felt my jaw clench but said nothing. My mother leaned into the frame, her face slightly flushed from the wine. "Ashley is doing so well, sweetheart. Now, about that wasteland property you have in Nevada. Agnes from my book club was asking about it again. She wants to buy part of it for a solar farm project. You should really consider selling it, honey. You could buy yourself a nice house like your sister's." "That's right," my father added, his voice carrying that particular tone he used when he thought he was being reasonable but was actually being dismissive. "Your brother needs capital to expand his business, and you're just sitting on 40 acres of sand and rocks. It's worth maybe $200,000 at most. If you're not using it, sell it. Family helps family, Samantha." I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay calm. "I've told you before, that property cannot be sold. It's federal research property. It cannot and will not be sold to anyone." My father's face darkened. "Federal property? It's in your name. We're your family, Samantha. You have an obligation to help us. Or do you think you're too important now with your fancy government job?" "The property is classified, Dad. I can't explain more than that." "Classified," Ashley scoffed. "God, you're so dramatic. It's a patch of desert, Sam. Get over yourself." I ended the call abruptly, my hand shaking slightly as I set down the phone. On my main monitor, the digital map of Site 7 Tango glowed with layers of data streams, underground tunnel networks marked with red classified, do not disclose warnings. They had no idea what they were talking about. They never did. 2 days later, I was reviewing radiation detection protocols when my personal phone rang. It was Marcus Webb, an attorney friend from my Department of Energy days. His voice carried an edge of concern that immediately put me on alert. "Samantha, I need you to look at something. I was reviewing some property documents as a favor, and I found something strange about your Nevada holdings. There's a power of attorney authorization on file that gives your parents limited authority over property transactions. It was renewed 8 months ago." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I never renewed any power of attorney. That expired years ago when I got my security clearance." "The paperwork looks legitimate on the surface," Marcus said carefully. "But the signature, Samantha, you need to get ahead of this. If someone used this document improperly, you could be looking at serious legal issues." I hung up and immediately pulled up my secure property files. There it was. A power of attorney document with what appeared to be my signature, dated 8 months prior, filed with the county clerk's office in Nevada. I stared at the signature. It looked like mine, but I knew with absolute certainty that I had never signed it. My family had forged my signature. Or worse, they'd had someone forge it for them. I barely slept that night, running through scenarios in my head. They wouldn't actually try to sell federal property, would they? They couldn't be that stupid, that reckless. The next morning, my father's text message arrived at 6:15 a.m. Great news. Sold your Nevada property for $240,000. Money will be transferred to your account next week. Thank us later. I almost dropped my phone. My vision blurred at the edges as rage and disbelief flooded through me. I called him immediately, not caring that it was barely dawn. What the hell did you do? I didn't even let him say hello. Samantha, language, he said, but I could hear the self-satisfied tone underneath. We did you a favor. Robert Chin is a visionary developer who wants to build a luxury resort on that land. The property is actually worth twice what we got, but $240,000 is still excellent for a bunch of sand and rocks. You can invest it properly now. A resort? On Site 7 Tango? Do you have any idea what you've done? That site has billions of dollars of sensitive national security equipment underground. You just committed a federal crime. Oh, stop being so dramatic, he said dismissively. It's just some weather sensors or whatever. You've worked for the government too long, Sam. You've forgotten how the real world works. This is business. This is family helping family. You forged my signature. We used our power of attorney. Perfectly legal. Now stop acting like a child and be grateful. Your mother and I are having brunch now. Goodbye. The line went dead. I stood in my apartment, phone still pressed to my ear, and felt something inside me snap. This wasn't just about money or property anymore. This was treason. This was espionage. This was my family selling access to one of the most sensitive nuclear monitoring sites in the United States to a man they knew nothing about. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the NNSA headquarters, my mind racing through the security implications. If this Robert Chin character was who I feared he might be, if he had any connections to foreign intelligence services, we had a catastrophic breach on our hands. Dr. Richard Martinez, the deputy director of NNSA, was in a morning briefing when I burst into his office without knocking. His security detail tensed, hands moving toward weapons, but Martinez waved them off when he saw my face. Dr. Reyes, what? We have a critical security breach, sir, I said, my voice shaking with barely controlled fury. Site 7 Tango has been sold. My family forged documents and sold the property to a private developer named Robert Chin. He's planning to build a resort on top of one of our most sensitive monitoring facilities. The color drained from Martinez's face. Site 7 Tango? That's impossible. That's one of our primary seismic monitoring stations. The underground infrastructure alone is worth $3.7 billion in current equipment value. I finished. And we both know it's worth infinitely more in strategic intelligence value. If Chin gets access to that site, if he can study the detection capabilities, every nuclear power that wants to test weapons covertly will know exactly how to circumvent our monitoring. Martinez reached for his phone and pressed a button. I need Director Chen, FBI Counterintelligence, and the Department of Justice on a secure conference call immediately. Code red authorization. Yes, now. The next 3 hours were a blur of briefings, conference calls, and increasingly grim faces as the full scope of the breach became clear. FBI Special Agent Thomas Crawford took point on the investigation, his steel gray eyes missing nothing as I walked him through everything my family had said and done. Dr. Reyes, Crawford said, pulling up a file on his tablet. Robert Chin, also known as Chen Robo. We've had him on a watch list for 18 months. He's a naturalized citizen, originally from Beijing, has a real estate development company that's purchased properties near 12 separate sensitive facilities over the past 6 years. We've never been able to prove he's working with foreign intelligence, but the pattern is too consistent to be coincidence. My stomach dropped. 12 facilities? 12 that we know of. Most were near Air Force bases, naval installations, or Department of Energy sites. He buys the property, claims he's developing it, and then just sits on it. Uses it for surveillance. By the time we catch on, he's gathered enough intelligence to be valuable and then flips the property to a shell corporation. He's careful. Very careful. Not careful enough, I said quietly. He picked the wrong property this time. Crawford nodded. We're moving on this immediately. We'll need you to walk us through the site's security protocols so we know what we're protecting. And Dr. Reyes? He paused, his expression softening slightly. Your family is going to face serious charges. Forgery, fraud, potentially aiding a foreign intelligence operation. You understand that? I met his eyes steadily. They made their choice when they forged my signature and ignored every warning I gave them. I'm making mine now. National security comes first. The FBI moved fast. Within 24 hours, they had mobilized a tactical team to Site 7 Tango, establishing a perimeter with armed guards, high-voltage fencing, and infrared surveillance. They also set up surveillance on my parents' house, waiting for Chin to make contact to finalize the property transfer. I insisted on being there when they made the arrest. Crawford initially refused, but I pulled rank using my security clearance and role as the NNSA officer in charge of Site 7 Tango's operations. If anyone understood the full implications of what Chin had almost accomplished, it was me. We were set up in an unmarked van half a block from my parents' house when Chin arrived, driving a black Mercedes SUV. He was exactly what I expected. Well-dressed, confident, carrying a leather briefcase that probably contained final property transfer documents. All units, target is entering the residence. Crawford spoke quietly into his radio. Stand by. Through the surveillance feed, I watched Chin greet my parents like old friends. My mother actually hugged him. Ashley was there too, dressed in designer clothes, laughing at something Chin said. They had no idea they were entertaining a foreign intelligence operative. 20 minutes later, as Chin opened his briefcase on the dining room table, Crawford gave the signal. Go, go, go. The FBI tactical team hit the house from 3 sides simultaneously. I heard the flashbangs even from inside the van, saw the sudden explosion of movement through the windows. Within seconds, they had Chin face down on the floor, hands being zip-tied behind his back. My family's screams were audible even from outside. I walked into my childhood home behind Crawford, my badge displayed prominently on my jacket. The scene was chaos. Chin was already being hauled to his feet, shouting in Mandarin at the agents. My mother had collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Ashley was screaming about lawyers. And my father stood frozen in the middle of the room, his face cycling through confusion, fear, and then anger when he saw me. "Samantha!" he roared. Tell them this is a mistake!" I stopped a few feet away from him, my voice cold and level. "You and Mom and Ashley conspired to sell federal property to a foreign intelligence operative. That's not a mistake, Dad. That's treason." "Foreign intelligence? He's a real estate developer." My mother's voice was shrill with panic. Crawford stepped forward, holding up his badge. "Robert Chin, also known as Chin Robot, you are under arrest for espionage, conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted theft of government property, and violations of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act." He continued reading the Miranda rights while Chin stared at me with unconcealed hatred. "You stupid woman." Chin spat in accented English. "You think you have stopped anything? You are just one small scientist. Your country is weak, selling itself for money. I am proof of that." I walked closer to him, meeting his glare without flinching. "You're wrong, Chin. I'm not small. I'm the person who's going to make sure you spend the rest of your life in federal prison. And my country isn't weak. We just don't tolerate people who try to steal from us." "Samantha, please!" Ashley grabbed my arm, mascara running down her face. "We didn't know. We just thought he was a businessman. Tell them we didn't know." I pulled my arm free. "I warned you, multiple times. I told you the property couldn't be sold. You forged my signature. You ignored every warning because you wanted money and because you thought my work was worthless. Now you're facing the consequences." My father's face had gone from red to purple. "We're your family. You're supposed to protect us." "I'm supposed to protect my country," I replied quietly. "You made your choice when you decided $300,000 was worth more than respecting my career, my judgment, or the law. Now I've made mine." Crawford nodded to his team, and they began placing my parents and Ashley in restraints as well. "You're all being detained for questioning regarding conspiracy to commit fraud and potential violations of national security law. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to an attorney." The rest of that day was a nightmare of interrogations, legal procedures, and damage control assessments. I sat in a sterile FBI interview room for 6 hours while Crawford and his team went through every detail of my family's actions, my warnings to them, and my discovery of the forged power of attorney. "Dr. Reyes," Crawford said during a break, sliding a bottle of water across the table to me, "I need to ask you something difficult. Do you believe your family was simply manipulated by Chin, or do you think they had some knowledge of what they were really doing?" I thought about my father's dismissive attitude toward my work, Ashley's constant belittling, my mother's insistence that the property was worthless, their complete disregard for my repeated warnings. "I think they were willfully ignorant," I said finally. "Chin exploited their greed and their lack of respect for my career. But they chose to forge my signature. They chose to ignore my explicit warnings that the property couldn't be sold. They chose money over listening to me. Whether they knew Chin's true purpose or not, they committed crimes, serious crimes." Crawford nodded slowly. "The Department of Justice is going to prosecute this aggressively. The fact that it's your family doesn't change the national security implications." "I understand," I said, "and I'll testify to everything I know." The trial took 8 months to reach court. In that time, the FBI's investigation revealed the full scope of Chin's intelligence gathering operation. He had indeed purchased properties near multiple sensitive facilities, using them to monitor security patterns, photograph personnel, and gather signals intelligence. The evidence was overwhelming, but his defense team fought viciously, trying to paint him as a legitimate businessman who was being persecuted for his ethnicity. My family's trial was separate but parallel. The evidence against them was simpler but no less damning. Forged documents, fraudulent property transfer, and criminal negligence in selling property they knew was federally significant. Their attorney tried to argue they were victims of Chin's manipulation, but the prosecution had recordings of my father bragging about the sale, emails discussing how to handle Samantha's objections, and bank records showing they had already planned how to divide the money. I was called to testify in both trials. The day I took the stand in Chin's trial, the courtroom was packed with media, security personnel, and observers from multiple government agencies. Chin sat at the defense table, his expression one of calculated contempt, as if this was all beneath him. The prosecutor was a sharp woman named Jennifer Torres from the DOJ's National Security Division. She approached the stand with a tablet in hand and gave me a slight nod of respect. "Dr. Reyes, can you explain to the court the significance of Site 7 Tango?" I took a deep breath and began. Site 7 Tango is a covert seismic monitoring facility operated by the National Nuclear Security Administration. It's part of a global network designed to detect underground nuclear weapons tests by any nation. The facility contains approximately $3.7 billion in advanced seismographic equipment, radiation detection arrays, and classified signal processing technology. More importantly, it represents decades of research into detection methodologies. If a foreign power gained access to that site and studied our capabilities, they could potentially develop nuclear weapons testing procedures that would evade our detection. And the property was registered under your name? Yes, as part of a federal property holding structure. The land itself is legally in my name, but the designation as federal research property means it cannot be sold, transferred, or used for any purpose other than its classified function. This is standard practice for certain covert facilities. Did you explain this to your family? Multiple times. I told them the property could not be sold. I explained it was federal property. I warned them there would be serious legal consequences if they attempted to transfer it. And what was their response? I looked directly at the jury. They told me I was being dramatic. They said it was just sand and rocks, worth maybe $200,000. They believed my work for the government had made me paranoid, and that I'd forgotten how the real world works. Torres pulled up an exhibit on the courtroom screens, recordings of my father's phone calls. "Is this your father's voice?" I listened to the recording. My father was speaking to someone, possibly my brother, about the property sale. "Yeah, Sam's being ridiculous about it. Always thinks everything is some big national security crisis. It's just a patch of desert. This Chin guy offered $240,000. We'll give Sam her cut and use the rest to help Justin expand the business." "Yes," I said quietly. "That's him." Torres moved to stand near Chin. "Dr. Reyes, the defense has suggested that Mr. Chin was simply a real estate developer pursuing legitimate business opportunities. Based on your expertise in national security and intelligence operations, what do you believe was his true purpose in purchasing Site 7 Tango?" "Objection," Chin's attorney stood. "Calls for speculation." "Your Honor, Dr. Reyes holds top-secret sensitive compartmented information clearance and has been briefed on Mr. Chin's intelligence activities. She's qualified to provide expert analysis." "Overruled. You may answer, Dr. Reyes." I looked at Chin directly. "Mr. Chin's purchase pattern over the past 6 years shows a clear focus on properties adjacent to or near sensitive U.S. military and research facilities. Site 7 Tango would have been his most significant acquisition because it would allow him to study our nuclear detection capabilities from the inside. With that knowledge, his government could develop testing methods we couldn't detect. That would fundamentally alter the global nuclear balance of power." Chin's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of anger crossing his face before he controlled it. Torres continued her examination, walking me through every technical detail of what Chin could have learned from Site 7 Tango, every security protocol he could have observed, every piece of classified technology he could have photographed or measured. By the time I stepped down, the jury looked shaken. Chin's attorney tried to discredit me during cross-examination, suggesting I was bitter about my family's actions and projecting that anger onto his client. But the evidence was too strong. The FBI had recovered encrypted communications between Chin and handlers in Beijing, surveillance photos of multiple sensitive facilities, and even partial schematics of underground structures he'd somehow obtained. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, they found Robert Chin guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit espionage, attempted theft of government property, wire fraud, and violations of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. The judge sentenced him to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. My family's trial was shorter but no less brutal. I had to testify again, this time detailing every conversation where I'd warned them about the property, every time they'd dismissed my concerns, every moment of disrespect and disregard they'd shown for my career and judgment. My mother cried throughout my testimony. Ashley stared at me with pure hatred. My father looked like he'd aged 20 years, his face gray and drawn. Their attorney tried to portray them as loving parents who'd made an innocent mistake, manipulated by a sophisticated foreign operative. But the prosecution demonstrated a pattern of dismissiveness toward my work, the forged power of attorney documents, and the recordings showing they'd planned to split the money without even consulting me. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s named Margaret Holbrook. She listened to all the evidence, reviewed the documents, and then delivered her verdict with cold precision. The defendants have shown a shocking disregard for both the law and their daughter's explicit warnings regarding this property. While I accept that they may not have fully understood they were dealing with a foreign intelligence operative, their actions in forging legal documents and fraudulently transferring federal property demonstrate criminal intent. This court finds the defendants guilty of fraud, forgery, and criminal negligence in the handling of classified federal property. She paused, looking at each of them in turn. The sentence is 8 years in federal prison for Mr. and Mrs. Reyes, and 7 years for Ashley Reyes, with credit for time served. Additionally, all proceeds from the attempted sale are forfeited, and the defendants are jointly liable for the costs of the security breach assessment, estimated at approximately $2 million. Ashley collapsed, screaming. My mother fainted, caught by a court officer. My father just stared at me, his face a mask of betrayal and rage. You did this, he said, his voice barely audible. You destroyed your own family. I stood up, gathering my papers. No, Dad, you destroyed yourself. I just refused to go down with you. I walked out of that courtroom and didn't look back. 3 years passed. 3 years of rebuilding my career, my life, and my sense of self. The case had made headlines, and initially, I worried it would damage my professional reputation. Instead, it had the opposite effect. The intelligence community recognized that I'd made the hardest choice possible, country over family. I'd proven that no personal relationship would compromise my integrity or my commitment to national security. Within 6 months of the trial, I was promoted to Director of Facility Security for the NNSA. Within 2 years, I was overseeing security protocols for every covert facility in the western United States. Now, I stood on stage at an international nuclear security conference in Vienna, looking out at an audience of defense officials, scientists, and policymakers from 47 countries. I wore a tailored navy suit, my hair cut in a sharp bob that framed my face professionally. I felt confident, powerful, respected. 3 years ago, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. The United States came dangerously close to a catastrophic security breach. One of our most sensitive nuclear monitoring facilities nearly fell into the hands of a foreign intelligence operative. The breach was prevented not through sophisticated security systems or advanced technology, but through the willingness of one individual to make a devastating personal sacrifice for the greater good. I paused, looking across the audience. That facility was Site 7 Tango, a covert seismic monitoring installation worth billions of dollars. The individual was me, and the price I paid was my family. The room was silent, every eye on me. I tell you this not to seek sympathy, but to emphasize a critical point. Our greatest security vulnerabilities are not technological, they are human. They exist in the gaps between personal loyalty and professional duty, between family obligations and national responsibility. The people who pose the greatest risks to our security are often not sophisticated spies or terrorist operatives. They are ordinary citizens who convince themselves that rules don't apply to them, that their personal needs outweigh collective security, that the warnings of experts can be ignored when they're inconvenient. I clicked to the next slide, showing a photo of Site 7 Tango, now fully secured with new perimeter fencing, guard towers, and advanced surveillance systems. We prevented the Site 7 Tango breach because someone was willing to recognize that family loyalty has limits, that patriotism sometimes means protecting strangers over protecting relatives. That integrity means accepting terrible personal consequences for doing what's right. These are hard truths, but they are essential truths for anyone working in national security. I received a standing ovation. Afterward, at the reception, I was approached by defense officials from 7 different countries, all wanting to discuss facility security protocols, insider threat prevention, and the psychology of security compromises. Later that evening, standing on the balcony of my hotel room overlooking the Vienna skyline, I received a notification on my phone. It was from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. My parents and Ashley had been released on supervised parole after serving 5 years of their sentences. Their attorney had filed a request for them to contact me, required under the terms of their parole supervision. I stared at the notification for a long moment, then dismissed it. No response required. I thought about who I'd been 3 years ago, uncertain, desperate for family approval, willing to compromise my values to maintain relationships that were fundamentally toxic. I thought about who I was now. A leader in my field, respected internationally, confident in my choices. The next morning, I flew back to the United States. My driver took me straight from Dulles Airport to Site 7 Tango. I'd requested this visit specifically, wanting to see the facility one more time before my next assignment in Los Alamos. The Nevada desert stretched out endlessly under a bright blue sky, the same landscape my family had called worthless. But as we approached the facility, it was transformed. New security fencing surrounded the entire 40-acre perimeter, topped with razor wire and equipped with motion sensors. Guard towers stood at each corner, manned by armed security personnel. A massive American flag flew from a pole at the entrance, visible for miles. We passed through 3 security checkpoints before reaching the main facility entrance. The guard at the final checkpoint saluted when he saw my credentials. "Welcome, Director Reyes. It's an honor to have you here." I returned the salute and stepped out of the vehicle. The desert wind caught my hair, carrying the scent of sage and warm rock. I walked slowly around the perimeter, looking at the innocent-seeming landscape that concealed such technological sophistication below. My phone buzzed. Another message from the prison notification system. I pulled it out and saw it was a forwarded letter from my mother, sent through official channels. I could read the first line without opening it. "Samantha, please, we need to talk. We've lost everything. You're still our daughter." I stood there for a long moment, thumb hovering over the delete button. Then I thought about what my family had taught me over the years. That my work was boring, that my expertise was worthless, that my warnings didn't matter, that money was more important than integrity, that I should compromise my values for their convenience. I pressed delete. A young security officer approached, a woman maybe 25 years old, her uniform crisp and professional. "Director Reyes? I'm Officer Chen. I've been assigned to escort you through the facility. I have to say, it's an incredible honor to meet you. Your testimony in the Chin trial was part of our training curriculum at the academy." I smiled at her genuine enthusiasm. "Thank you, Officer Chen. Lead the way." As we walked toward the facility entrance, she continued talking. "I wrote my thesis on insider threats and family-based security compromises. Your case became the defining example of why personal relationships can't override security protocols. The way you handled the situation, making that choice, it showed everyone in the field what real integrity looks like." We descended into the underground complex, passing through additional security layers. The facility hummed with quiet activity, dozens of technicians monitoring screens, analyzing data streams, maintaining the sophisticated equipment that helped keep the world safe from secret nuclear weapons development. Officer Chen showed me through the updated security protocols, the enhanced monitoring systems, the additional structural reinforcements that had been added after the breach attempt. "Every change here exists because you spoke up," she said. "This facility is more secure than it's ever been. Dozens of other facilities have adopted similar protocols. You probably saved lives, Director Reyes, thousands of them." After the tour, I stood alone in the main control room, looking at the displays showing real-time seismic data from across the globe. This was what my family had tried to sell. This vigilance, this protection, this shield that stood between civilization and nuclear chaos. I had given up my family for this. I had chosen principle over blood, duty over comfort, integrity over easy forgiveness, and I would make the same choice again without hesitation. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Marcus, my attorney friend who'd first warned me about the forged documents 3 years ago. "Saw you on CNN at the Vienna conference. You were brilliant. Coffee next week?" I texted back, "Absolutely. Tuesday at 10? His response was immediate. "Perfect. Proud of you, Sam." I smiled, slipping my phone back into my pocket. That was what real support looked like. Real respect. Real friendship that didn't come with conditions or demands for compromise. I took one last look at the control room, at the personnel dedicated to this critical mission, at the technology that had almost been compromised. Then I walked back toward the surface, toward the sunlight, toward whatever came next. Behind me, Site 7 Tango continued its silent vigil, protected and secure. Above me, that American flag snapped in the desert wind, a symbol of the values I'd chosen to uphold even when it cost me everything I'd once thought mattered. My family would probably never understand. They'd probably spend the rest of their lives believing I'd betrayed them, that I'd chosen strangers over my own blood. But they were wrong. I hadn't chosen strangers. I'd chosen millions of strangers who deserved to live in a world protected from nuclear threats. I'd chosen the principle that some things are more important than family loyalty. I'd chosen to be the person I needed to be, not the person my family wanted me to be, and that was a choice I would never regret. As I drove away from Site 7 Tango that afternoon, watching the facility disappear in my rearview mirror, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Complete, unshakable peace with who I was and what I'd done. Some people say you can't choose between family and duty. They're wrong. You can. And sometimes, when your family asks you to compromise everything you believe in, everything you've worked for, everything that makes you who you are, the only honorable choice is to choose duty. I chose duty. I chose integrity. I chose my country. And I've never looked back.